Hello and welcome, fans of spirits from around the world and from around the World Wide Web. This is the April 20th live panel discussion brought to you by Bevridge. For those of you here for the first time, welcome. You are in for a very interesting and engaging conversation. For those of you who have been here before, thank you for tuning back in with us. And for those of you not listening live, thank you for checking this out, even though it happened sometime in the past. So for those of you that don't know what this is all about, these are weekly discussions that we Bevridge host to enlighten you all on the world of spirits, to take you a cut deeper than perhaps what you would know from your regular journey, your discussions in the aisles, and what you might sip with your friends. So we like to bring together a panel of experts from around the industry, and we pick a topic each week to bring you an educational forum with content related to the latest spirits trends, tastings, what to invest in, the business of spirits history, and so much more depending on the week and depending who we have on. We do encourage participation. You can ask questions as we go if you are watching on bevridge.co. That's our website. If you are watching on YouTube Live, sorry, we won't see your comments until after this has been recorded. We recommend you hop over to bevridge.co if you want to engage. But wherever you're watching, we're happy you're here. And if you upvote anyone else's questions, that will pop it to the top and make it most likely we'll see it. We might not get to it along the way, but we'll try and catch up with everything at the end if we haven't answered any questions. So for those of you who are new, what is Bevridge? Well, first of all, it is my employer. I'll tell you a bit about myself in a moment. But we are an exciting new company that is helping you all find spirits fit for you. How do we do that? We work with the best suppliers from around the world of premium spirits to create tasting collections that are curated for you to be able to explore a range of spirits within one category. But it's not your average tasting. In addition to sending a number of samples straight to your door from our e-commerce platform, each is supported with a broad range of digital content that includes on-demand, behind-the-scenes access to the distilleries, to the makers behind each of the products in the collection. You'll get to taste along with the people who made the product, and a whole lot more, as well as topics like this, weekly panel discussions, and an exciting new venture that is now officially on sale is the return of Whiskey Live to the United States and Canada. So that will be happening in Nashville this summer, July 23rd and 24th. You can buy tickets on our website. So you've now been listening to me talk for, 2 or 3 minutes, wondering who the hell is this guy. I am Charlie Rodman. I am the marketing director here at Bevridge, and I'm going to be leading our panel discussion tonight. What we're going to be talking about is a topic that's near and dear to me. It is from passion to profession, and it's about people who fell in love with the spirits industry and the journey from being a fanboy all the way to a full-time professional. And I have one guest with me tonight. It is a recent dear friend of mine, but someone whose brand I have been drinking for a number of years. Welcome, Colin Keegan of Colin Keegan Spirits, Santa Fe Spirits, the Colin Keegan whiskey. The first thing I have to ask you, Colin, is what are you drinking tonight?
Actually, I was going to decide as I joined in. I think I'm going to go for the regular.
Very good. I love the regular.
Regular Colin Keegan. And we'll talk about what I mean by regular. It does nothing regular about our whiskey, of course, but I'll just pour myself a dram there. Let it air in the glass. And here's to a lively, engaging conversation.
Cheers. I have your cask strength here, a beautiful bottling that you sent me a number of months ago. Thank you very much. I've been enjoying it ever since. I actually think since I got this bottle, I'm a little depleted at the moment in my collection as I'm in the midst of a move, which is why I'm in this gray void. But I think out of the 20 or so bottles that I have around the house at the moment, since I got yours, and it's pretty, I don't know, I'll call it half full, definitely not half empty because it's delicious along the way. It's probably the bottle I've drank the most out of in the past few months. It's such an endearing and engaging spirit.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's good to be in good company of fellow whiskey drinkers.
Oh, there's so much to talk about with this whiskey and with this topic. I don't want to kind of put the cart before the horse and jump right in with the end of your journey and what you're doing today. So I want to start with who you are, what you're doing. You are the founder of Santa Fe Spirits. Of course, that means you're in Santa Fe, but you bill yourself as a whiskey aficionado. What exactly does that mean to you?
Well, I think somebody came up with a fancy word aficionado at some point when they were talking to me, and I just said, oh yeah, that fits. Don't by any stretch of the imagination think that makes me more knowledgeable about drinking the all wide varieties of whiskey. I know our whiskey and I know craft whiskey very well, but aficionado has a little connotation of, hey, I'm going to teach you all about whiskey, but I'll teach you what I know about whiskey, trying to not blow it up too much. But really, I didn't get into this business thinking about whiskey, actually, thinking about apple brandy. That was 12 years ago when I designed a house in an apple orchard. Project fell apart. I bought the apple orchard and we moved on to, starting to distill in my spare time. And when you do that and somebody says, I'll buy a bottle, you then realize, oh my goodness, I'm a moonshiner. Better stop this and actually come up with a business plan and get it all sorted. And one thing led to another. And I was lucky enough to start really making a product I really enjoy myself, which is whiskey. And it's turned out to be the flagship, thank goodness, of the whole distillery. So it's really where our focus goes.
By no means do I want to just focus on the whiskey, as delicious it is. I do want to hear about all of your spirits, but for those with perhaps a keener ear than the average American, they might have picked up you don't have a New Mexican accent. So what's the story there, Colin?
It's actually a West Texas accent. No, I'm only joking. It's Northern England. I did leave there, goodness, in 1990, a long time ago, maybe longer ago than some of the people who are listening to this have been on the planet. But there you go. Met my wife in the Caribbean. I was sort of sojourning around the world. We landed here in New Mexico. She's an artist, and I was an architect way back then. And there was some great work to be had and really wonderful houses. And like a lot of people, when the economy took a downturn, this was in 08 and 09, I decided I'm going to look for something different. At that time, distilling was just a hobby. Well, I don't tell the government that, but it was just a hobby. And I decided to step it up a bit, bought a building, bought a still, and we really haven't looked back. We, like a lot of other craft distillers, I wouldn't say we fell into this, but never really thought we'd be here today on Zoom calls post-COVID talking about, my passion. I just sort of dived in, and I'm very linear, and you're always sort of chasing the next goal and the next goal. I looked at it at the beginning like architectural projects, being let's build this distillery out, let's do it, make another addition, put another addition on. I was looking at the facility and then come up with extra products, vodka, whiskey, brandy, gin. And, add some people. You need a good crew. And again, when I meet other fellow distillers, and I was lucky to be included in the latest box set that Bevridge was doing, we all sort of got together on screen and off and realized we never thought we'd end up here, It's funny to be talking about passion 12 years later.
Well, we were certainly lucky to have you in the collection as well. That's a two-way street on the luck there. But so I'm a little intrigued because you're the founder of Santa Fe Spirits. You started off, let's not call it moonshining, and you bill yourself as an aficionado and not a distiller, and you're giving all of the applause to the wonderful team that you also have there at the distillery. So has your role evolved over this time, or are you still distilling, or did you just never did moonshiner not sound as glamorous as aficionado? Where did it start and where did it stop?
I'm a true believer in teaming up with people, both in many different aspects of my life, who really know what they're doing better than you do. I'm in a lucky position that I founded this thing. We had, a few pennies to rub together to employ a couple of people here and there. My business manager gets a lot of kudos for taking care of all the paperwork that's involved. And there is mountains of paperwork. We're in 12 states, in Germany and Australia and Japan. That means 15 different distributors, 15 different sets of paper. And then there's payroll, and then there's all that. So she does that a lot better. Our current distiller is new to us, actually. He's only been with us a few months, Stephen Julander. And he has a very extensive whiskey background, and I think an incredible palate. So that's a really good balance in a distiller. Sales guy, who's another new guy. It seemed like COVID, everybody sort of reinvented themselves. We're lucky that it's a kind of cool industry to be in. So as we, say, hey, anybody want a job distilling? It's not difficult to find people. Now, trying to find bar staff to man our tasting rooms is a bit of a challenge, but our bar manager really knows how to, work in the service industry better than I do. So it really is kudos to the team. And, to extrapolate that out into a bigger picture, kudos to the whole industry. I mean, I think a lot of us would have left if it wasn't such a cool group of people to hang out with. And I use that word cool. I'm way too old to be cool myself, but as a founder, I get to sort of hang out with some very neat people in our industry. They, the people who were in that whiskey box, and I saw somebody, thank you for the kind note. They tasted number 4 in the box. There were 7 distillers, I think, included in that, and all are really good friends of mine. I'm very happy to be in with them. And I learn something from each of them every day. We spend a lot of time on the phone, yakking about things and Zoom calling about things. And it really is good to be, part of a growing industry. I mean, it really is. I mean, when you talk about passion, it really brings it back to you. Just doing this and saying, what am I going to talk about? I don't know what to say. And then you start talking about what we actually do on a day-by-day basis. And it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's basically my favorite part of the spirits industry. And I think for me personally, a huge part of what turned it from a niche interest to a massive fascination to both the personal and professional driving interest in my life was just the community. Of course, like any community, any geeky thing, there's going to be some pretense. There are going to be some assholes along the way there, but 99 out of every 100 people are just genuinely excited to sit down and share a dram with someone, or to share their experience with someone. Or, one of my favorite things is, as someone who has a lot of bottles, I love the fact that I've probably got 100 bottles that I've shipped with me across the country 3 times that I never pour out of, because they're kind of like in this mediocre area where I don't love them, I don't hate them, I don't want to use, they're too good to use in cocktails. And so if someone comes over and says, oh, I really like spirits, I go, oh my gosh, you have to try this. And if someone comes over and says, it's just not my thing, I go, let me try and prove you wrong. You have to try this. And so it's like, let me always pull the good stuff out. And that's how I ended up where I am with this enthusiasm, because there were so many people who were years ahead of me who had that enthusiasm, who had that passion, who kind of showed me the light and showed me the right way to go about it, where it is so much about sharing and the experiences. It's not about hoarding bottles in a basement. I always like to say, drink spirits, preferably good ones, better yet with good people. Yeah. Just the more you can put that together, the more I think you'll be able to enjoy the craft, fall in love with the passion, and really understand the communities that made these things as well as the communities that enjoy them.
Most definitely. You use the word community, and that really is, I think, for me personally, a huge factor in doing what we do. And that goes to our suppliers, our salespeople, our distributors. I know they get a bad rap, but I feel for those guys. They get such pressure from the big guys, who get such pressure from board members who are, say, or shareholders. I know we made 12% last year, make it 15% this year. COVID be damned, I mean, what are they supposed to do? And our suppliers are struggling just as much as anybody. The fact that we don't have glass, actually our problem at the moment is corks. We have no Colin Keegan corks left. So if you all rush out and buy Colin Keegan, we don't have anything to put on top of our bottle. So we are freighting them, air freighting, which is a lot when you ship 30,000 corks from Italy as soon as they can get them to the airport.
Not to mention 140% surcharge on jet fuel. So it all comes through.
Freight's gone up, supplies have gone up, travel's gone up, but it has for everybody. And I honestly think during COVID, our common enemy was actually, a virus. But now afterwards, there really isn't a common enemy. But we are all going to have to huddle and figure things out between us. I've traded, some bottles with somebody for being able to jump in front of the line with them for the label supplier, so we could put labels on our vodka. We call each other and say, "Help! Would your whiskey fit in my bottle?" I mean, I wouldn't put vodka in a bottle like this. I can't even see myself here actually on this screen. I wouldn't put vodka in this bottle. Apple brandy, maybe, So we have these conversations and Zoom calls accordingly. It's a lot of fun.
You were just talking about kind of the nexus of two interesting points here, particularly for spirits and craft spirits, where community and COVID. And so much of the spirits industry is getting together with people, sharing a drink, sharing stories over a drink. Yeah. And I actually found it quite wonderful the way that from groups and just the people all the way up to the industry, how much it adapted to enable community over Zoom and group tastings and virtual tastings. Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, myself included, there were some pretty long, pretty drab, pretty dark times. And just being able to get on with a group of friends and share a toast to something, anything positive, and catch up was a bit of a godsend at times.
100% agree. I look at it just from our little industry. But I know many other friends in other industries, completely different, who, long, dark times, they really were. And it was quite a challenge. I mean, everybody heard about us making hand sanitizer. That was great. We actually, because we couldn't run tasting rooms, my bar manager ended up helping redesign labels and getting government approval for our RTDs. We now do bottle Manhattans, bottle Negronis, bottle old fashions, So we've expanded. Now I've got more SKUs than I can shake a stick at, or SKUs to give it the proper terminology. But we pivoted and pivoted and pivoted, as did everybody. I wouldn't say we had as hard a time of it, but it was fascinating to be in small business. Scary. If it hadn't been so scary, it would have been really interesting as an exercise to watch, But there again, as soon as we could, we opened it up, went to various conferences, and could really share some war stories.
So I think anyone listening can probably tell we're both pretty big nerds on this. We're both very excited to be talking about this. I want to take a couple steps back with you and find out where this passion began for you. Or obviously, if you're born in Northern England, you're a stone's throw from one of the great spirit producing regions of the world, but I might be assuming that had an impact here. or if really it was just a venture of convenience and something of interest because you were living in an apple orchard. Was there a specific dram that triggered this interest for you, a moment, a memory, an interaction for you where you were like, this isn't just something that you're supposed to shoot, or, if I go up from the plastic bottle, there is added utility here.
I will admit, way back, in England, things were a little different. Here in America, you can drink at 21. So people seem to start at about 18. In England, you can drink at 18. So people seem to start at 14. So anyway, late high school, I could not figure out what all the accolades that were given to whiskeys were all about. But I couldn't afford a decent bottle of whiskey. I was a college student. So I was drinking, all the blends and saying, well, yeah, I don't see what the fuss is about. Let me go back to beer. Anyway, left it for a few years. And I was actually back in an architect's office when one of the senior architects introduced me to a single malt. And we were sitting with a client who had just designed a huge house, like an 8,000 square foot, $5 million house. And this was 20 years ago. 25 years ago. Gosh, I'm older than I thought. Try this, he said. I said, whiskey, okay, fair enough. And it nearly knocked me out of my chair. I mean, it was wonderful. And he said, well, if you like this, try this other one. And I only drank those 2 whiskeys that night, but that was a turning point. I went out and bought myself a different bottle of single malt. When I opened it, it was completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on, what's going on? What's a single malt? They're all different. Well, how do you know what a single malt is? And for me, it was single malts a lot. And then, of course, as you branch out from that, you start finding out, this is a bourbon. So I really started thinking about this stuff about 25 years ago. And differentiated, what whiskey is. Obviously, which everybody here, I'm sure, knows is the category. And single malts fit underneath, as do bourbons, as do rye, or wheat whiskey, or spelt whiskey, whatever you want to make it out of, as long as it's made from grain. So really, I would say it was older gents sitting around. Actually, it was in a country club when we did it.
Do you recall what the distillery was?
The dram we were drinking was, what was one? Oh, it was Balvenie.
Great.
And I was like, that's lovely and smooth and soft. And then it was Lagavulin, which kind of hits you in the back of the head with a chunk of peat, And I couldn't figure this thing out. And then I left those. What did I do after that? I can't remember what the bottle was I bought, but it was back in the smoky category. And then realized, there's different times to drink different whiskeys. And it really sort of became part of a hobby. Back to architecture, working hard, making a living, etc. And one thing led to another, and I built up a whiskey collection. And once you've got a whiskey collection, you've got a lot of friends, as you know.
Absolutely. Indeed.
So, friends would try, and I'd converted a few people. Didn't actually join any whiskey clubs because we sort of ended up forming our own and trading whiskeys, trying whiskeys, buying it for Christmas or holidays, I should say, and birthdays. And always sort of got into thinking about distilleries really in 2009. God, I got to make whiskey. But the apple brandy was what we were making. And it just seemed like a nice transition because it's a similar, obviously brandies are from fruit and whiskeys are from grain, but similar distillation process. And hence that drove the still we bought. You couldn't make vodka on our still because it's only got 5 plates and we rarely use those ourselves.
So it was a bit of a journey, but sparked with a very definitive moment.
Yeah, it was. I suppose it was quite definitive. And then, of course,
that's cool.
Yeah, no, it is. It's kind of cool, actually. And along the way, learning a lot more about whiskeys. I was very lucky that my wife and I took my parents on the Royal Scotsman, which is a train. The train that goes around Scotland. and it's a bit like the Orient Express. It's a very classic old style train, and we couldn't quite get the tour we needed, so we had to go on a whiskey tour, and that really gave me a lot more depth in distilleries and what have you.
I did enter a competition for like 2-week trip on the Royal Scotsman.
Oh,
As it typically goes, I did not win, but I was very eager. That was like the lottery ticket, it's just, I hope I can get this one.
Yes.
So my story is similar on the discovery part, but it is almost flipped, where I do remember the first whiskey that I enjoyed drinking, neat or on the rocks. It was the TX blended whiskey, which now is so sweet. I have a hard time with it because my palate's just shifted over, both as I've aged and as my preferences have changed. But it's actually still quite a lovely whiskey, and I love the way they bottle it. But I kind of went from that through the other sweeter, Crown Royal kind of came next. And then I went through Irish and bourbon, and then really started collecting. But the moment it really changed for me, clearly I was already a ways down the rabbit hole, because I was on a consulting engagement in London and spent my entire per diem on a glass of Highland Park 30 year, which I had never tried anything like it. It was like, you know what? I get this budget to spend on all my food and living expenses for the day. Screw it. I want the whiskey. I'll to take the rest out of pocket, or I actually ate a bag of chips or crisps, as you'd say,
Yes.
just for dinner, because that was like 50 pence and I didn't have any actual money, and figured that the Highland Park was worth it.
It is. I would agree.
I so distinctly remember it was the first time I had an experience where the finish of the whiskey was not just like a diminution of the flavors that you have. It's not just fading out. The majority of the taste and the evolution and the development happened in the finish. And I should try and pull up this email. I remember I was sitting at a bar. I drank it. I asked for the bill. I signed it. I paid. I walked all the way back to my hotel, and I wrote my dad an email about this whiskey I had just had. And only as I finished writing the email, about 20 minutes later, did I stop tasting it. And that for me was just like, wow, whiskey can do that. Like that is just unbelievable. And ever since then, it's just been off to the races. It's been a complete fascination.
Yeah, it's that Highland Park is definitely one of those that will stay with you for a long time after sipping any of them, really. And we do refer back to Scotch a lot. In here in America, we've got now whiskeys that just have the same depth. I mean, one of the interesting parts about joining the spirits industry is it's very different from the beer industry in that aspect, that it used to be Budweiser and Coors Light. Very well made beers, but very simple and very monotone. When the brewers decided to reinvent beer, they were starting from scratch and trying all kinds of things. IPAs didn't exist, really, not in the way they do now. In the whiskey industry, the difference is there was already some really exciting whiskeys out there. When us craft guys got on the market and said, hey, we're sure how to make whiskey, there was plenty of good whiskey around, and we learned.
It's amazing you say that, because I have, I think, about 1,000 bottles of whiskey at this point. And wow. I very often hear, like, are there even that many different styles? And it's like, haven't even scratched the 1% of what's available out there, even with that. And that's the most fun of it, is just the breadth is endless. But okay, so you've touched on a few things right here that we actually need to circle back to and dive into. So firstly, you were saying on that first night that your eyes were open to the wonders of whiskey. Lagavulin was one of the first things you had, and it was a kick to the back of the head with peat. You also mentioned sort of craft guys trying to push the boundaries and the history of Scotch. You're sitting at a very interesting intersection of all of these various topics with what you're doing in Colin Keegan. where you are doing single malt, but it's American single malt. And I'll ask you to talk a little bit about that and why you've chosen to take that avenue.
Yeah.
But really interesting to me, and one of the things that I found fascinating about Colin Keegan since the first time I tried it, I think all the way back in 2014, as part of the first online and craft whiskey order I ever made. I splurged and bought like 5 random bottles to be able to get things I couldn't find in New York City. And Colin Keegan was one of them that I had shipped in. One of the things that's fascinating is you all dry part of the barley with mesquite smoke. And for those who may not know, the way that smoky flavor gets into a whiskey, be it peat or in this case mesquite, you burn that to help dry the malt to stop the germination process and prepare when you're preparing the malt for fermentation distillation. So in Scotland, peat is the conflagrant of choice. It's desiccated moss, essentially, that comes out in these big bricks. It's what people burned to heat their houses. And so in the American Southwest, of course, there isn't peat, but there are other types of wood. There are other conflagrants. And so you are very much leaning into the same tradition, but making it culturally and locally relevant to your current location. Tell us about how you landed on that unique mixture, what it means for the community, for you in the community, and just the inspiration there.
I think you gave a really good descriptor of how the grain is dried. So when making whiskey, we decided, we'll just do a single malt. We'll just use barley and we'll see where we go. And as putting together a business plan, one of the things I learned in architecture was if you can differentiate yourself in a small boutique business, you stand a better chance than trying to compete with the big guys straight off the bat. So just a straight malted barley, really, we would have to wait 12, 15 years to have something with the same depth of what I say the Scots are doing, but it is all over the world these days. The Indians are coming out with some great whiskey, believe it or not. I mean,
absolutely believe it.
East Indian, yeah. Japan, of course, everybody seems to know about that. So somebody said, try something different. And I was lucky to have a distiller working with me at the time who's moved on to teach in the local college here, a distilling and fermenting course. And he said, let's do it with a local wood. And we have 2 woods here in New Mexico. And, 6 feet is a tall tree here in New Mexico because we get 4 inches of rain a year. So we tried pinon. And those of you in the Northwest, which is, the pinon fires that we have, that's where the pinon, the pine nut, comes from, which is great. Old conifers, these trees. I don't know if you've been around a campfire with too much sap, or even a home fire with too much sap. You get that acrid taste at the back of your throat. Pinon is actually a beautiful tree and smells great in a fire. But when we were distilling, seemed to be concentrating the tar sappiness. So that wasn't a workable tree to use, way too strong on the flavor. And then somebody said, well, try here we call them juniper trees. It's in the mesquite family. We tried it. It worked great. We're trying mesquite chips, and everybody knows the mesquite chips for barbecuing. So that really has a lot of influence in our little dram here that we put out from the distillery. We can talk about our aging process and why you can't age faster, but why we can get a good flavor profile quicker.
Please, yeah. But first, I can confirm it works spectacularly. I mean, I've been in love with this whiskey since I tried it. I think, like I said, back in 2014. I've taught a number of classes on peat, and I will always include this to put a curveball in when I do a class on peated whiskeys. But it always gets such like pleasant eyebrow raises, like, oh, well, this is this is different. Where's this? What is this? And kind of, for me, when you talk about terroir, which I don't want to distract on that whole topic, but anytime I drink your whiskeys, I do feel like I'm like out in the desert. It has this dryness, this lovely smokiness. It just feels like an arid day.
Yes.
And it's just a perfect, like, quenching intriguing, engaging, like barbecue on an arid night. I'm picturing like I haven't been to New Mexico, so like an Arizona sunset, and I just get all of this synesthetic experience while I'm drinking your whiskey.
Well, thank you. I mean, really, that's what we're aiming for. So I'll give a very quick background on exactly what we do with the whiskey. It's a regular 2-row brewer's barley that we use, and we don't see the barley in the raw stage. The malting houses do. 2/3 of the grain that goes in the whiskey is regular brewer's 2-row raw barley. Comes from Shakopee up there in Minnesota, and the 1/3 that's smoked, because we want to tone the smoke down a bit, comes from Chilton, Wisconsin. Great big malting houses out there in the Midwest, kind of sort of Midwest, really. All American grain, and it's all 2-row raw barley. Just 1/3 is smoked and 2/3 are unsmoked. We bring it in. It's a 2-part distillation. So we do a full stripping run. We could spend the whole conversation on whiskey making, actual making. And then we do a finishing run. We do a nice slow finishing run. And you don't really smell that much of the smoke then. It's kind of odd. You smell it when the grain's being mashed. Then it's fermented into beer. You can really smell it that way. While it's distilling, you don't get so much smoke, but you get the sort of the phenols and the esters and everything, and the wonderful smells around the distillery. Once it's the second distillation's done, we actually proof it to about 118 to 122. Yeah. Well, that's before we put it in the cask.
Right. I just wanted to see if you were going up or down as it aged.
Which whiskey I'm talking about. So then we put it in cask, the 53-gallon casks. I think I'm a true believer in the traditional way. I'm not myself, although to each their own. I'm not a whiskey snob. If you think you can age a whiskey with a gadget in 3 weeks, you have at it. That's not the way we like to do it, seriously. But that's what I like about the industry. Everybody's trying something different. So I think the bad will fall by the wayside. I think the good will make it through. Hopefully we're one of them. I believe we will be. Here's to
cheers.
That. But
I believe
cheers.
it too.
I'll have a dram. That'll be for luck. But then we age for a minimum of 3 years, which is a very small number. But here in New Mexico, we have so little humidity that the higher esters, that the sharper whiskeys that you really do want to turn into an angel's share and evaporate out of the cask, disappear pretty quickly. There's no sort of osmotic pressure on the outside of the cask from the moisture you would get in Kentucky or Scotland or somewhere like that. And we do lose a lot. Our angel share is 12%.
Whoa!
A year.
For reference, that's like quadruple Scotland.
That's quadruple Scotland. Yeah, it really is. However, after 3 years, we believe, and we've entered competitions and we get feedback from people like Charlie himself there who say, after 3 years, this is going to be good.
Mighty fine.
So we've lost 1/3. Again, weirdly enough, the biggest difference is we're at 7,000 feet. So we're pretty high up there, higher than any whiskey in Scotland. We call them lowlanders where we come from. And so we're the lack of humidity and the very lack of pressure up here is means that when we pull that whiskey out, it's actually gone up in proof. You do this in Kentucky, and whiskey being acerbic wants to absorb moisture from around itself. There is no moisture to absorb here, or very little. So our whiskey, we put in 118 to 120, and sometimes it comes out 130 proof. Typically, the average is about 126, 127.
Right. And that would just keep going up if you leave it longer.
If we left it long enough, there'd be very little of it left, but at 12% a year. So we pull it out after 3 years. However, we're making a lot more than we're selling. So slowly but surely, it's getting older. I see there's some questions here.
Yes, that's what I was just going to bring us back. I didn't want to interrupt because I think that
bring me back, or I'll pontificate about nothing important.
For anyone who wants to go a bit deeper, even we do have the the journey into Santa Fe Spirits video as part of the American Single Malt experience, and you can hop over there and get not only a tour of the area, but a bit deeper into all of that history. So we have a question here about what you would recommend for someone who wants to make the jump into spirits or whiskey from the corporate world, which is one I think we can both speak to. Rebecca, thank you for that question. So Colin, I guess you've shared how you did it or what the transition was, but why don't you tell us about maybe perceptions for someone who might be asking that question, or misperceptions about working in the spirits industry that someone on the outside might think? Because I get asked all the time, or I get the reaction all the time, you must have the coolest job in the world. And it is still a job. Like, it is an amazing job and I love it every day, but it is still a job. So let's take that in two parts. One, any advice, and two, what misconceptions. You go first and then I'll share my view on that.
Yeah. Boy, there's many different ways to come at it. And I've categorized them sort of into three groups. People that have very deep pockets. Hopefully corporate America's been very good to you and you've got deep enough pockets. I still would get partners and try and share the journey. And you can make some great products and wait for them to age. 3 years in New Mexico, a lot of the bourbons are 5-6 years old, etc. That's a long time to carry an inventory, start a business. It takes 2 years to get a really good whiskey made before you get it into a cask. So there's that way. The way we did it was we made an unaged whiskey. And I think you talked about our Silver Coyote, which is straight after still, moonshine, basically, into bottles. The reason we carry a vodka and a gin is they're clear spirits and you can make them and sell them quickly. So there's different ways to do it. And another way that some people do it is they source whiskey. Used to be frowned upon by the craft.
I was going to say it's often considered a dirty word, but by no means should it be. I mean,
no, not at all. I mean, I don't know these fellows at High West. It's one of the few distilleries I don't know, but they're a shining example of sourcing whiskey for years, being totally honest and open about it. We don't make this, but we're very good blenders, and we're going to sell a lot of bottles, put that money back into the distillery. And they built it up, and now a part of the Constellation brand, I believe.
They are, yeah.
And they make some great whiskeys. So the jump from corporate America, Google, send it to info@Santa Fe Spirits, and we can sidebar, and I'll tell you my whole stories. I'm always happy to share. I'm inclusive. Bring on the competition, I say. Something to think about, though. We started 12 years ago when there was 200 craft distilleries. I think we're at 2,300 now. So it's grown, 1,000% in basically just over a decade. The distribution angle of the business is another whole beverage talk, but it is a real challenge. I, like a lot of craft distillers, thought we'll make some great whiskey and then we'll sell it a couple of days a week, something like that. You asked about why my profession's changed from distilling. I don't have time to distill anymore. I'm chasing down distributors, and I have a corporate job now, unfortunately. It's sort of gone full circle. I spend time in boardrooms, arguing with distributors, trying to raise money for the next round of where we're going to go. It sounds bad. It's not. We believe what we're doing, and we believe in our product, so it's all kind of fun. Distribution issues, new changes in rules and regulations, trying to change those rules and regulations. I sit on various national boards that are working on direct-to-consumer shipping so that you can sit at home and Charlie can end up with 2,000 whiskeys you can order from around the world, At the moment, it's not legal, but we're looking to change that kind of thing. So that's where it's all going.
Now, in case, Rebecca, you weren't asking about how to leave the corporate world and start your own distillery, because that is for those intrepid souls with a lot more chutzpah than I have. I took a rather different way about it, where I actually went and started in the corporate side of the spirits industry. So I went from my corporate consulting job I had previously mentioned, where I first wet my toes by consulting for one of the major global spirits brands. And don't think of it as the evil empire. It was actually a wonderful, phenomenal experience, and they make absolutely amazing products. And they were some of the first to nurture my inquisitiveness. They saw an interest from me, and they encouraged me to try, and all of that. So it's not, corporate isn't all bad. As great as a lot of the stories are with craft, a lot of the stories from the big guys are equally interesting, just much more mature. That wasn't my first jump, though. I didn't actually join that company. I went to one of the other large conglomerates, and I found something that was parallel to what had already been my day job, but that would fit within that world. So for me, my background in consulting, my specific role was more around audience modeling, data analysis, stuff like that. And so I went and worked in a consumer insights and strategy function. And, it's a pretty integral piece for a large business, understanding what consumers' needs are, what consumer trends are, what product innovation needs to look like. And if you can ask the right questions and analyze the data the right way, that's a foot in the door. The same, they have a financial planning and accounting department. They have all of the same departments that any other corporation would have, but you get to sit one step closer to spirits. And then as I built out sort of that repertoire, moved into a different avenue, which actually, Colin, I've seen you've been repouring a little bit here, so I'll do the same. In that job, I actually got to do some of my strategizing in a new way, which led me to get to pick the casks for Signatory that come to the US. Oh, wow. So I wanted to start with a cask you picked, Colin, for me, and then a cask I picked for everybody else as my second one. Yeah. And then now I'm working with Bevridge, being able to do it in a way that's really close to my passion of sharing and helping others get so excited and try to get people into the community and bring these tasting experiences to people who may not have the selection at their store, or may not have had the people that I got to meet who kind of held my hand early on in the process, or who don't have the chance to do this as a part of work. So they can't travel to the distilleries, but would love to go visit and meet the people and build those really intimate connections you normally only get by being on site. And so for me, being a part of a brand whose mission is to deliver that experience to people in the comfort of their own homes is as close as I've ever been to connecting the passion and the profession. The second side of the question that I introduced, what some of the misconceptions might be, and I'll go first this time, Colin, then turn it back to you, is for a lot of people, it is still just a day job. It's kind of the flip side of that coin that led me into this industry. When I first started, I was working for a major international Scotch brand, and there were people in the marketing department who didn't know that Scotch was often aged in ex-bourbon casks, or they didn't know the difference between a pot still and a column still, or what defined a single malt versus a bourbon. And they were marketers who could just as well have been selling toilet paper, but this was an interesting, exciting category to ply their trade for that they got an offer for. That's by no means the majority of people. And I think the closer you get to the distillery, the less true that is. Again, in any industry or in any hobby or there are going to be a couple outliers. For the most part, it's the most wonderful community of people, most passionate community of people I've ever worked with. Yeah. But one of the things I didn't expect was, since I came into it being so passionate, and that's what led me there, to find people for whom it was just a day job was just like so confounding and hard to wrap my head around.
I 100% agree with you, Charlie. It's I will say, coming from the corporate world, you have a lot of skills that us idiot entrepreneurs who start businesses really need, because you've probably been from corporate world, had to watch the pennies and the pounds and the budgets, a lot of the people, if you're in the craft industry side of things, I will say we're all sort of matriculating up into the business world. And the more business professionals that can come out of corporate America and help us, the better. I have a CFO at Santa Fe Spirits, and he's in his mid 70s. And to him, this is like semi-retirement because he's not in a, an office day in, day out. He gets to taste the whiskeys, come to conferences, come to do all kinds of stuff. But he's the guy who's hopefully making sure that the funding's always there for the next steps that we need. So the corporate world is changing. The whole world of business is changing. People are changing jobs. In the craft industry that I'm in the spirits world, we really are seeing a lot of corporate people make the jump over. Maybe not to distilleries quite as small as ours, but there's some bigger ones that we've talked about that are even in this, the kit that we put out, the tasting kit, that are hiring. The salaries might not start the same, but you're there to help the company grow, to go somewhere. And it really is getting in, not necessarily at the ground floor, but you get in with a chance to really build something bigger and better,
I've taken a number of jobs that came with a pay cut, but let me get closer to what I love doing. And it has been worth it every single time. I mean, it's just being able to feel like you're a part of something, being able to work every day on something that you really care about and that you get excited about, like I'm on the East Coast, someone in a different position might look at this and go, crap, it's 8:45. I have to get on a call and talk to Colin for an hour. Like I'm actually a little terrified because I have the timer here. We've only got about 7 minutes left. I don't know where all the time went, and I don't know if we're allowed to extend, but this conversation could easily keep going. So I'm just thrilled to be able to talk to you about this and to be able to share these
I would
stories.
take any and all questions. I just wanted to sort of dive in. There's a Peter C who asked a question. Mesquite barrels, are they an option? They would be if the actual structure of the wood would hold up to stop the whiskey all falling out. Mesquite trees, the grain goes every which way. In oak, it stays a lot more linear. That's an easy answer. And it would actually impart way too much flavor of the mesquite flavor. Oak is actually, believe it or not, quite toned down and helps. So I hopefully that answered the question. But there again, Colin at santafespirits.com. Ask me questions offline if they get more in depth and you don't want to bore the people with them here.
I was about to go very deep and ask, what if you made a mesquite, aside from the fact that it would impart flavor too quickly, a mesquite barrel and then encased it in an oak barrel. So as the mesquite let it through, then it went into the oak and it would reflex in and out that way.
That would be quite something. To get it to really reflex in and out, you'd want the staves to be wide apart, because otherwise it would just hold it in the
hold it in. Yeah.
But we've tried various things with cask. We could do a whole session on this, on cask aging. We've wrapped them in. If anybody goes out hiking, we've wrapped them in Gore-Tex coats, basically a barrel-shaped coat to try and keep the angel share in, and it didn't work.
Curious. I've always wondered. I thought about seeing if I could apply for a patent for this or something, but creating like a stainless steel or cast iron clamshell that you put around the cask so that what evaporates just pools back onto the bottom and then still has wood contact from the bottom of the barrel.
That sounds like a more palatable solution. There again, and I'm not pouring water on it, try it, because you could do it with some very specialized whiskeys. It's just, how do you store them?
Right.
We've got so used to in our industry of storing these funny round long-shaped things that we stack them and put them on rails, etc., etc. That would mean working in a different way. We have tried, and we are working with called Scotch Bonnet. It's a case that goes on the heads on either end of the cask, and that stops a lot of evaporation. The curvature of the cask, where it hits the head, which is the flat disc on the end, that joint there is where you lose more whiskey than anything else in our distillery anyway. We tried waxing it with a flavorless wax, and it works, but you still want some of it to escape, as we talked about earlier. Otherwise, those higher, volatile, sharper flavors stay in the whiskey, and you don't want them.
Right.
Otherwise, you don't get this.
Fascinating. So we're coming right up on time. I don't see any more questions. I think the last thing I would maybe ask you is maybe a follow-up, but perhaps a more pragmatic one. What advice would you give to anyone, just to the people, either someone who's getting started and wants to find their way down the rabbit hole and really turn spirits from just something that they drink on the weekend with their friends or something that they do for a social occasion into something that they can get really passionate and excited about, or maybe advice for someone who is at that stage and wants to take that leap into a professional pursuit?
There's various different levels. Joining a whiskey club, you learn a huge amount. I'm in various whiskey clubs, and it is fascinating. I learn every time I go and do a presentation. Somebody takes me off to the side and says, "Hey, have you thought about this or that?" Another way, there's some great services like Bevridge, and I'm not just here for a sales pitch, but I've learned a lot about presentation and packages and how these online Zoom calls, etc., work, and how to promote. I think what you've done at Bevridge in the promotional world has been great for us as people learning in the industry. We're makers. A lot of us are very tactile people who want to build distilleries, make a whiskey, and then what? You actually have to sell it to somebody unless you got a boatload of money. If you really want to go deeper, you would go to the conferences. ACSA is the group I'm a board member of, American Craft Spirits Association. I think they do the best work in the industry. Just go to a conference. It's 4 days of hanging out with distillers. There's a big whiskey side to that, typically, because that's where we all get very excited. Although a lot of them do what we do. We've got 9 products. 4 of them are the whiskeys that we were talking about. If that's all way too much, find a very boutique liquor store in your neighborhood and go talk to the manager there.
Odds are he'll be excited to talk to you if you come in and just
excited. If somebody says, "Tell me about this," and I'll buy a bottle and I'll come back. Now, to keep them interested, you typically have to buy a bottle, but that's not so bad. You can drink it and go back, hopefully not the next day, hopefully, a month or so later. But I think the whiskey clubs are the way, and now you can do it online. You really can, We're now distributed in 41 states because we've signed up with an online marketing group, so you can get our whiskey in 41 states. Just go to our website and order from there. I wish it was direct to consumer. It's not, but that's coming soon. And you'll find that most of us, like me here, are happy to stand around and talk about whiskey. I'm lucky that my team does all the hard work and I get to just talk a lot.
Most of the good ones are. I mean, from master distillers at the biggest distilleries on down, almost anyone will just be excited because there is so much passion in this industry. One bit of advice I would add, if you are like I was at the start of my journey and are intimidated to join a whiskey group or are afraid of saying something stupid and are intrigued to go deeper down the rabbit hole, first of all, don't worry about it because everyone's been there. But if you still are, what I'd recommend is just get a group of friends together and have everyone bring one bottle. Don't plan on drinking them all. This is distilled spirits. It can knock you on your ass pretty quick, so always drink responsibly. But everyone just bring something and ask everyone to bring something they've never tried before, or ask everyone to bring something that they think looked interesting or had gotten a recommendation on. And if you want to try them blind, have everyone put them in a brown bag when they show up so only they know what it is, or don't do it blind. Either way, just start to build a community that you can explore and grow with, and it helps really just propel you all along together. And if you want to make the jump to the professional world, I'd say troll the job boards, or like the way I ended up at Bevridge, send some cold emails. Just reach out, tell people why you love what they've got going on and why you think you could could be an asset for them.
I'm currently hiring an assistant distiller, and
There
we will train from no knowledge at all. My head distiller is a great teacher, and he would teach you from scratch if you want to make that leap.
And Colin, I believe you were there when Liz, my boss, said that I am not allowed to apply. So
yes,
unfortunately, I will not be throwing my hat in the ring on that one.
Yes.
But anyone watching, I definitely encourage you to do so. If you haven't gotten the impression from this call, Colin is amazing. If you haven't tried the product, see for yourself what you'd be having a hand in making, because it is spectacular. And if you're in the Santa Fe area or interested in living there, this should be on the top of your list.
Come and see us. We love to talk, as you can probably tell.
All right. That I think we're going to have to call it because we're pushing the hour mark. But Colin, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Everyone.
Been a pleasure. So I was just going to say it's been a pleasure. And onwards and upwards with some great spirits.
Onwards and upwards. Thank you to everyone who joined us. Don't forget to check out Bevridge.co, where you'll find our whole American single malt tasting experience, which has the Colin Keegan American single malt, as well as 9 other fantastic single malts, all enhanced with a wide range of about 15 videos that will take you behind the scenes and with the makers. I also want to reiterate, that Whiskey Live is coming back to the United States this summer in Nashville. That'll be July 23rd and 24th at the Gaylord Opryland Hotel. It's not just for Nashville residents. We encourage everyone to come and see us there. We're going to have many distillers present, again, including Colin and
I'll be there.
A number of our other distiller partners. It's not just going to be brands. We're going to have a lot of education. We're going to have a lot of sampling. We're going to have a demo stage and plenty of time to meet and greet with the people behind all of these great products. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. We do have these panel discussions every Wednesday, and so please tune back in 8:45 Eastern, 5:45 Pacific. Next week's panel discussion will be all about the Old Fashioned, hosted by our recurring host and cocktail guru, Camper English, who will be taking you all throughout the deep history of the classic whiskey cocktail. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night, and I hope you're enjoying something delicious tonight.
Good night, guys.